Hamilton, going back in. Now I've got my monopod, so when they surround me, my camera can still get over them.
All right.
We don't feel safe with
What is feminism? All right. I need some more. What is feminism?
Having a choice. Or choices. Having choices.
What else?
Being
Okay, this one. Yeah.
being accepted for who you choose to be, or see yourself as.
Okay.
We both actually ended up talking about how the word is a thing that carries this sort of assumed meaning that it has been like placed on it that is not totally true. And that it's a process to sort of break that down and realize that in a larger like popular culture sort of sense, we're taught that it's one thing that, whoa, that's not really what it is. So,
Yeah. So if you think about what it is, what is it?
I guess those things are already up there. It's more like
Okay.
intersectional, inclusive,
Okay.
more expansive.
Okay.
Inclusive.
So it's not just a woman thing. Is that kind of what you're saying? Right. So I think Bell Hooks in her book Feminism is for everybody. Okay. We'll go 1, 2.
Okay. It's a tool for framing questions.
Would you call it a critical lens, Dad?
Lifelong learning.
I've never thought about blogging before, but I might.
Okay.
All right.
You've inspired me.
I encourage it.
So let's also keep going. Keep going. What else? Is this it? Is this our definition?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much just trying to reach equality for all people.
Equality for all folks. Okay. So I have feminism is about having choices. It is being accepted for who you choose to be. Feminism is about empowerment. It is inclusive. It is a tool for framing questions, a critical lens. Feminism is intersectional. It is about multiple, interrelated identities. Feminism is strong. Feminism is for everybody. It carries an assumed meaning. It is the process to equality. And equality for all people. Now, on one hand, I look at this and I say, cool, man, right? Like this is, I'm down with this, I think. Now, when we think historically about
Don't ram that into my camera.
When we think historically about what is feminism, we also think about feminism is about voting rights.
Sure.
That's dangerous. You shouldn't climb on chairs that roll and swivel like that. Fall and hurt yourself.
Yeah, so here's my thinking. So I kind of see this as a bit of an intractable conflict. Right? And so you do what you want to do, and I have a job to do over here. And what matters to me more than someone being disruptive is that you all engage with what is feminism and how has whiteness limited the work of feminism. And Sweetness, I so see you and I so appreciate what you're doing, but I don't want you on a chair. I'm nervous about.
I'm comfortable for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we trust you. Yeah.
Just be so careful, okay? Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
That came up in our conversation, and kind of my feelings around feminism is that this all looks like an ideal, but I don't see that it's the movement.
Okay. Thank you for that segue. Tell me about the movement. What are the limits of the movement? So I want to put up here voting, right? So we think about women's suffrage in the 20s, right? And, you know, this was it was a multiracial movement, though women's suffrage is not often known as a multiracial movement. And that when white women got the vote, everybody didn't get the vote, right? So, though women of color were active in supporting the right to vote, and very much saw it as a part of racial struggle, white women in their organizing said, I don't know if we can pick that up, right? So in the negotiations to make voting something real for women in the US, women of color were negotiated under the table. Okay?
So we have just about, because I had always kind of heard that like feminism actually started with like privilege, like class. So
Absolutely, right? So a history of feminist movement is that it was white, middle class, and upper class women who were leading feminist struggle, right? Or who kind of were recognized. So even, you know, when we think about the pill, right? So we think about, is it Stringer? Margaret Stringer? Sanger. Thank you. When you think about Margaret Sanger, right? Margaret Sanger was a wealthy woman. And in her thinking about the pill, she was really thinking that this is a tool that could be used for married women to control their fertility. And that in her thinking, she developed her studies around the pill on women of color, right? And support and her work. For Margaret Sanger was also someone who believed in eugenics and this idea of getting rid of the undesirables, and low-income women and women of color and people with disabilities and people who are gay were part of that undesirable, right? So, and we recognize that having control over one's body is a feminist issue, right? So bodily autonomy is also about my feminism. But my question needs to be, who has bodily autonomy and who doesn't? Right? And what does that say about their social location? Right? So their race, their class, their ability, their physical ability, status, or experience, right? Because we recognize that we, through our lives, may be differently able, right? That doesn't, we are not fixed, right? And so forth. So, looking at some of these, how do does this definition decenter whiteness? Or how can we begin to decenter whiteness in working with our definition? What are some of the elements?
The tool for framing questions. Just hearing concerns from people that are being oppressed within the movement, and then framing questions to kind of address those concerns so that we can start to get answers and solutions.
Being oppressed within the movement, is that what you said?
Yeah.
And?
So that we can start to,
So we're wanting to hear, how are people being oppressed?
yeah.
And what are some of the solutions that they have to changing that?
So just really framing lot of questions to come up with effective solutions.
So, and that would mean listening to the people who are talking about their experience and also looking for the voices that aren't there.
Yeah.
So if we are acting and making assumptions and going about our lives thinking that we're doing the very best ever, and there's not all the people who are included in that conversation, probably aren't doing the very best ever. So figuring out ways to be in a relationship and bring other people into the conversation so that when we're doing activism and we're doing movement building, we know when we have we've met that request of having the full picture of everyone involved.
Yeah. What else? Right?
Yeah.
I think first, to be able to decenter the whiteness, we would have to look at how white supremacy lies within the movement. Like, we would definitely have to be able to analyze that first.
Okay. So, white supremacy resides within the movement. Okay? So, something that we can think about here, I think about how Bell Hooks talks about white supremacist, capitalist, heteropatriarchy, right? And often in feminism we say we're about getting rid of patriarchy. And what is patriarchy?
System ruled by men.
A system ruled by men, okay? Now, but what we recognize is that if we are ending white supremacist, capitalist, heteropatriarchy, to undo patriarchy, we need to engage white supremacy, right? And we need to engage the inequality created by our capitalist system. We also need to address heterosexism, right? The notion that heterosexuality is normal and everything else is deviant, right? Because what we recognize in our system of oppression, that it is about interlocking systems, right? And that whiteness has been an overarching system that has been a driver for oppression within our society.
So should we have our communities, our small community groups meet for that challenging whiteness piece? Yeah?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So as we were talking and as you were processing through your own feminisms, we kind of came up with this collective thing, and we have begun to add a few elements that would broaden a feminist perspective and broaden that activism. So the next piece that we wanted to have people do was to think about what it means to challenge whiteness in our own activism. So, and also operationalizing these notions. So I put a definition on the board from Bell Hooks that kind of speaks to the way that we've begun to flesh it out. So feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and all forms of oppression. So if we were going to actually do that, if those weren't just like some cute ideas, what would it look like to do that? What we'd like you to do is to get into groups of 4 and talk about what that actually could look like. So you're visionaries, visionary feminists, we're going to operationalize this idea. So please get into groups. You're going to talk for about 10 minutes and make some lists, and then we want to hear from you about what we can actually do.
All right.